Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. I am the librarian Katrina. If you are new here, welcome. This is where I am reading through the enormous library of books you see behind me, and then I give you a quick synopsis and I tell you what I think of them. So if you like books, just aren't sure what to read next, hit that subscribe button, like and share my videos. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, this week's book of the week joined my library a few years ago right after publication, and then for reasons having to do with intellectual laziness, other projects, I just didn't get around to reading it, which is a very bad thing because, frankly, this week's book, Permanent Record by Edward Snowden, this should probably be required reading in every high school, like American civics classes. Do they still teach civics? I don't know. Probably not, because, school these days sucks. Shoehorn it into current events or something. Something. This book should be read and understood by everybody. And because I added topical cocktails a few weeks ago, I will be mixing up a Spy Classic Martini. Shaken, not stirred. As a quick aside, there are literally dozens of internet articles explaining why shaken, not stirred is the exact wrong way to mix a martini. The ice basically fractures in the mixer and dilutes the alcohol in the shaking process. So, I'm betting the diluted alcohol is why Bond would have it shaken, because, you got to keep your wits about you when you're seducing the ladies. You should really be stirring it, not shaking it. So let's do this. All right. You do start with gin. I will be using aviation gin. Again, not sponsored, just what I had on hand. Edward Joseph Snowden was born June 21st, 1983 in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, to Lon and Wendy Snowden. He has one sister, Jessica. And this book is a true autobiography, all right? It's not just the events. He explains how his childhood and his childhood fascination with computers kind of laid the groundwork for his future life. And this was really well done because it made him completely relatable, especially, I think, to Gen Xers like me, and probably to computer nerds of Millennial and Gen Z and whatever the newest generation is. I don't even know anymore. What am I doing here? I am doing 2.5 ounces of gin. Oh, you know what I'm going to need? I'm going to need my shaker with the lid off. So, 2.5 ounces of gin. 2.5 ounces of gin. Completely relatable. I'm only like 5 years and some months older than him, so the childhood he described resonated with me on many levels. I was like, yep. I was never the computer geek that he was. I was always a nerd, though. Even then I preferred reading over anything else. But I do remember playing many of the games he talks about when I was a kid and going, okay, yeah, I can relate to that. He accurately captures the horror of 9/11. So many people who were alive, this was the generation before, like my parents' generation, they could tell you in detail where they were when they heard that JFK had been assassinated. I remember every moment of 9/11, and I was 3 hours behind on the West Coast. I was working in a hotel in Nevada at the time. So I was only able to watch the newscasts, kind of replay that image of that plane hitting the tower over and over again, and that ran all day long. He was actually at Fort Meade, not working, well, he was, but not working for Fort Meade. He was working as a programmer for the wife of one of the servicemen stationed there, and she received the call about the possibility of another plane heading towards the Fort Meade area, and the fort was being evacuated. Ultimately, this ended up being United Flight 93, which crashed in Pennsylvania, so it never made it to Fort Meade or wherever its intended target was. But there was a massive traffic jam, and the cell phone lines were all tied up, so he couldn't call anybody and let his mom know that he was okay. Just the evacuation was pandemonium, apparently. A half ounce of dry vermouth. It's going to be a little vermouthy. It was a little over a half ounce. Now, his own family background was service to the country, always. His father and his grandfather were U.S. Coast Guard. I think his grandfather was an admiral in the Coast Guard. His own father worked, I believe he said, in engineering. And this sort of service, and coupled with the events of 9/11, prompted him to want to do something for his country, which, again, resonates, right? That was one of the things that made me jump track to majoring in criminal justice, was this idea to go into service in law enforcement. So I get it. My own story aside, I never made it to law enforcement, which is probably a good thing because I'm so anarcho-capitalist now they'd hate me. But he enlisted in the Army, is what he did. However, during training, he ended up with basically microfractures on his tibia that, I mean, he was told if you continue with training, you're going to fracture your legs entirely. And so he was given the choice to accept kind of an administrative discharge, meaning no fault, right? No fault, no foul. We're not going to blame you, but you're out of the Army. Or he could stay in and kind of roll the dice on his career track. Now, the track he had been in was ultimately going to lead to Ranger training. If he rolled the dice to go back through training, he might have gotten Ranger training again, or he might become the company cook. So he took the discharge path, and he returned home to Maryland, the Maryland side of the DC Beltway, and started to heal up and kind of looking for a new career path. This says to stir for 30 seconds. I will be shaking it for approximately 30 seconds. Okay. God, that gets cold. All right. We poured into our Martini glass. I bought a Martini glass just for this video. Oh, yep, it's coming out cloudy, just like they said it would, because, you know, crushed ice. Oh my God, that is very full. Used to my other little glass. That's okay. I'm so scared I'm going to knock this over, but you know what? It's okay because I'm pretty sure my husband has a backup keyboard somewhere. Throughout the entire first part of this section of the book, he talks about how when he was a kid, he was always looking for the hack, looking for the shortcut, the most direct way to obtain the goal he wanted. And so he recognized that the military giving him this out as their hack. If he takes the discharge, he's responsible for any future medical disabilities that might occur, right? If he stays in, they're going to take care of him, but again, could become the company cook, which he didn't really want. So initially, I don't think he initially intended to join the intelligence community directly. I mean, he recognized they had a need for computer people, and he had been teaching himself computers since he was like 9. Dash of bitters if desired. Well, I'm going to desire it because I've never had one of these before, so we're going to do a dash. I don't even know what a dash is. I'm doing a lot of dashes. And then add cocktail olives, which I actually did. I'm going to do the garnish because, frankly, I can't imagine Bond having his martini shaken, not stirred, without having some fucking cocktail olives. Although I couldn't find a little sword, so I have to do a toothpick. A fancy toothpick. The quickest way to get a job that required a clearance was to get the clearance first, basically. Now, I don't think that's how it's done now. I think you actually have to have at least the job offer before they'll start putting you through a clearance because it's expensive. Doing a background check is an expensive proposition. Most of the companies, if they hire you with this background check, you are required to work at least a year so that they can recoup the money they spent getting you that clearance. I don't know if that's how it was when he was hired, but that's how it is now. Now, and I'm not just talking about like a background check for a prospective landlord, all right? They might reach out to local law enforcement and say, hey, have you arrested this guy ever? Sorry, I have a little bit of a headache right here today. He was specifically seeking out a TS/SCI clearance, meaning top secret, sensitive compartmentalized information, with a polygraph. That's like the top level you can get. That's going to open a whole bunch of doors for you if you can get it. And it's a lengthy process. It can take up to a year, right? And they're going to talk to everybody you know. They're going to talk to your employers, your teachers, your neighbors, your family. They're going to ask about your life. What are you like? Are you a good person? Do you do drugs? Do you do alcohol? Are you not paying your bills on time? Was there any adultery in that failed marriage? And Snowden says they're not looking for perfection. Even if the answers to all of the above questions are yes, as long as you are robotically honest about it during the investigation process, you're pretty much in the clear.
Can confirm.
Eventually, obviously, he passed because he was hired as a contractor. I don't remember off the top of my head which company hired him, but he was hired as a contractor. And here's where he kind of goes into what the deep state is. Let's try. I've never had a martini. Let's try this. The gin's awesome on its own. I'm not sure how I feel like it mixed with vermouth. Maybe I should dirty it up a little bit. We'll see. I may not be drinking all of this one. Bond might be disgusting. Ugh. So he starts out as a night shift guard at a new building site, basically making sure that nobody sneaks in and plants bugs all over the place during the off hours when construction's not happening. When the building was completed, he became a tech guy, an IT guy. And he basically worked with a guy who was the Ron Swanson of the IC community.
Ron!
Hello, Andy.
It's quiet in here. Where is everyone?
The government is shut down. It's in every newspaper.
How long is it gonna last?
Now, if we're lucky, this building will be empty for months.
He was glad for the paycheck, but didn't really trust the government from which he drew that paycheck. I feel you, Ron. I feel you. And the guy existed basically to switch the backup tape on recorders. Basically, the government at the time didn't trust the servers not to crash, and so at night they backed everything up on actual tape. Snowden saw this as his whole life if he stayed there, roaming the halls at night until he was promoted to a position of obsolescence. It's useful only because he knew how to do one obsolete thing, like change an old school tape deck. So he did kind of a backwards career track. Most people in this part of the deep state, I skipped that. He mentions the deep state. The deep state, most people think of as the unelected bureaucrats who run the country. OSHA, for example, right? Goes further than that. The federal government, believe it or not, is limited on the amount of employees it's allowed to have. I'm not just talking about the 536 members of elected Congress and Senate, president and vice president, and the 9 judges. I'm talking about the actual staff and the actual federal agencies. They're limited in their direct employees. However, it can hire as many contractors as it wants. And in the post 9/11 world, the budgetary constrictions for contractors was non-existent. Contractors, as much as the non-elected officials, are the deep state, and he's now one of them. Now, most people, when they're part of this community, will start with the federal side, and then once they get X level of expertise, they'll jump ship and go over to the private side, the contractor side, and earn the really big paychecks. Because again, there's government caps on what you can earn based on the pay level you're at. There are no caps on the private side. The sky's the limit, right? So he did it backwards because he didn't want to be that guy who stuck around until he was obsolete. So he got the clearance, was working as a contractor, and saw there was a position as a technical officer for the CIA, so he applied for it and was accepted. Basically, he was going to be the tech and machine guy for the CIA at an overseas location. And it was during his training period with the CIA that he started to get rumblings of rot, basically. Most companies, if you ever had a job ever, during your onboarding, they're going to tell you, we have an open door policy. If you have any concerns about anything, you can come to anybody in management and we will take care of it. We'll listen to your concerns and do something about it if the concerns are valid. The CIA, at least, and probably most government agencies, is not like that. They do not have an open door policy. They have a chain of command. They expect you to respect that chain of command. Did not get better dirtying it up. I'm not a Martini person. It's not awesome. It's not awesome. God, I wish I had water up here. You better not step outside that chain of command. The training class was unhappy. They were in an unsafe environment, like they were training in a hotel and one of the stairwells literally collapsed while they were there. I mean, nobody was hurt, but that's not safe by any metric, having a stairwell collapse on you. They had a ton of overtime which had not been paid. And yes, you should be paid for the training for this. And so Snowden was kind of elected as the one to approach the boss. And he first approached the chain of command. He did try. When nothing changed, he went to his boss's boss and the boss above that. Change happened, but not without retaliation. Snowden had applied for a very specific spot. He wanted to be somebody who was based in DC, but they would send out to like military locations in hot zones, like in the Middle East, to fix problems, and they denied him that and instead sent him to Geneva, Switzerland. Most people would think that's a pretty plum posting, right? You're going to be in Geneva, in Europe, the heart of it all. But he was sent there to be a mechanical monkey at the embassy, and that's not the career track he wanted. So eventually he ends up in Tokyo. And here is where the true rumblings start. While he was in Tokyo, he was again a contractor, this time working for Dell as a contractor for the NSA. While there, he was tapped at the last minute to give a briefing to a joint IC conference on America's digital surveillance capabilities. The original speaker had gotten sick, so he was tapped. While prepping the brief, it started to sink in just how vast those capabilities were. And kind of the first niggling of doubt started. And I remember he was an actual CIA employee, and every actual federal employee, contractors don't have to do this, but federal employees do. They have to raise their right hand and swear to defend and uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It's the Constitution they swear to uphold, and that is an important distinction, okay? I mean, basically, my God, the worst, most exaggerated fears we all have about the government spying on us are true.
There is no doubt the government is tracking me. We're gonna have to put off the rally.
They're spying on you?
Yeah, it's right here. I went to Amazon to see if they had Grand Theft Auto 5, and it says, you might also be interested in the Blu-ray for Star Trek. I'm totally interested in the Blu-ray for Star Trek. How did they know that unless the government is keeping tabs on me?
My husband and I like to joke that our FBI guy is Chad, and we'll say, hi, Chad. But it's true. They are spying on us. They were, and they probably still are. And he explains in grim, autistic detail just how far-reaching the scope of their reach is. You would have to go fully off-grid to avoid it. I mean, fully 100% off-grid to avoid this. And I don't even think you could do it in the continental United States because of satellites. If you have a cell phone, they already have your information. Smart TV, new car, all computer traffic, all of it can be and probably is logged by the IC in some capacity. The NSA argued that they didn't need a warrant to collect the information, only to access it, and so far the courts have supported that interpretation. And basically our government has failed us at every step from 9/11 on. But it gets worse. It's fabulous. In July of 2009, the Office of the Inspector General of 5 different IC agencies released a report called the Unclassified Report on the President's Surveillance Program. If I can find a link to it, I'll include it. It's probably still out there. So Snowden, having retained the same curiosity he had in childhood that sent him to notify Los Alamos National Labs, for example, of a flaw in their web directory that left privileged information open to the public, he kind of began looking for this classified copy of the same report. And he couldn't find it at first. And he eventually just forgot about it because it just wasn't popping up, so he just let it go. And then one day it just kind of fell on his lap. He was a systems admin, which means he had access to basically everything you have to be able to do that job. The designation on it, which I'm not going to spell out here because it'd be like, A, B, C, and you have to spell it out. I'm not going to do that. It's in the book, though, if you really want to find it. The designation was such that only a few dozen people in the entire world had authorization to actually look at it. And because he was a sysadmin, he was one of them. And the only thing that this report had in common with the unclassified report released to the public was the title. That's the only thing. The American public were spoon-fed a bunch of lies, and we ate it up. Because, hey, they're keeping us safe from another 9/11, right? Gradually, the idea begins to form that we, the people, need to know about this. And he was worried. He didn't want to just release it to a website. He didn't want to just upload it and have it go for broke like a WikiLeaks thing, because he was worried that his credibility would be shot. He'd be lumped in with UFO conspiracy theorists and, the second shooter on the hill conspiracy theorists, and no one would believe him, with the added bonus of he would spend his time in jail being not believed. The idea dawned on him to release the information to a few select journalists. Almost immediately, though, this idea became concerning because he starts researching which journalists would be good to reach out to, who would actually follow through on it. And he found an article that was written by Eric Lichtblau and James Risen for the New York Times. The article was written in 2004 about Bush's warrantless wiretapping program. And it was ultimately quashed by the editors of the New York Times, that old bastion of journalism, at the request of the U.S. government, citing national security concerns. So, well done, journalists. You too have failed at your job. The New York Times ultimately published the article a year later because Risen told them, hey, I'm putting this in my book, so you might as well publish now. Far too late to affect the 2004 elections, which saw Bush win a second term, and the warrantless wiretapping continued unabated. Now, lest you guys think that Obama was so much better, he definitely was not. Snowden released his information in 2013 during Obama's second term. Obama had 4 whole years to put a stop to this, and he didn't. And I'm quite sure Trump didn't either, because he didn't pardon Snowden. He had 4 years in which to pardon Snowden, and he didn't. So, yeah, none of them are any good. It's rotten. But rest assured, our government is fully complicit in violating our rights. Now, everything Snowden released was not released to the enemies. He didn't actually go to China or Russia. He went to Hong Kong, which at the time was still considered an independent state. And that's where he met the journalist. That's where he released the information. He wasn't trying to go to Russia. He was on his way to Ecuador with a political asylum pass when the U.S. government canceled his passport and he wasn't able to reboard a plane. He spent like 40 days living in an airport, which is nothing compared to that one guy. There was like a Tom Hanks movie about it who spent like 8 years at an airport because he didn't have a passport or anything. That's a total tangent. He released it to American journalists, not to our enemies, so that we, the people, might understand just how bad it was. Sorry about the background noise. My bird is active today. 3 months prior to releasing this information, everything he provided, and I mean everything, was condensed into a 30-minute presentation and released for free by a government-sanctioned individual at a tech show that was open to the public. Tickets were $40. Iris Gus Hunt was the chief technology officer of the CIA. He appeared as a special guest speaker at a tech event in New York called GigaOM Structure Data Conference. His speech there is still on YouTube. I will link it in the description, but here's the relevant point.
But these are security services into which what happens is that the widgets and the analytics above it have to talk to the security services in the middle in order to get to data and computational infrastructure and things like that below it. And so the security services all have to be in common, and these are things that we want to make sure are very consistently enforced across anybody touching any piece of data through any analytic has to run through one of these security services.
And basically we're under surveillance all the time, constantly. If you have a phone, a smartphone, it's going to tell the government everything that it needs to know about you. Scary, right? And that's basically what Snowden released. He just released the documentation to prove it. And he took the documents from the government to prove it. And that was the crime. And while GigaOM's speech, when Snowden wrote his book, it only had 313 views. It currently is up to like 39,000. Which is horrifying. It should have millions of views. But he didn't go through proper channels on his release, and so he's vilified, right? Just prior to his data dump, Snowden transferred jobs again, this time taking a position as a sysadmin with Booz Allen Hamilton. He had to go to Fort Meade for his onboarding, and while there, he learned just how broad and deep the surveillance state has grown. And this is a direct quote from the book. Quote, "It was, simply put, the closest thing to science fiction I've ever seen as science fact. An interface that allows you to type in anyone's address, telephone number, or IP address, and then basically go through the recent history of their online activity. In some cases, you could even play back recordings of their online sessions so that the screen you'd be looking at was their screen, whatever was on their desktop. You could read their emails, their browser history, their search history, their social media postings, everything. You could set up notifications that would pop up when some person or some device you were interested in became active on the internet for the day." That shit made my blood run cold. I mean, I immediately sent my sister a text message of caution. Unencrypted, it's an unencrypted text, but damn. Snowden spends a lot of time not specifically harping on the importance of encryption, but basically weaving the necessity of it into his story. It's because he was so very careful with his own encryption that he is now living in Russia and not at Fort Leavenworth. He does explain in detail how he was able to get the information out of the facility where he was working, but I'm not going to relay those details here. I mean, I gotta leave you some curiosity so that you buy the book and read it. Don't just leave this one on the shelf to be read someday. I was serious when I said it should be taught in high school. It should also be taught in college. It could be taught in philosophy classes, like The Weight of Your Conscience. It could be taught in ethics, right versus wrong, American history, current events, criminal justice, U.S. Constitution. There are multiple topics that are covered in this book that should be taught and understood by everybody. And make no mistake, the wrong teacher could easily spin this as a bad guy doing the wrong thing for the wrong reason. But in reality, he's a fucking hero with giant brass balls and nerves of fucking steel. And we should all be thanking him. And he should be pardoned. And I'm horrified that we've had 3 presidents, Obama, Trump, Biden, and not a single one of them are as bold and brave as he is. He's still. I did notice a curious thing, or rather, a connection leapt out at me in reading the final chapters of this book. And he is pleased that more websites are now using an HTTPS protocol. That S stands for secure, meaning there are levels of encryption now. So more people are using encryption. Google ain't it, folks. Google is wholly complicit with the government. And he recommends you use a Tor server, which will help, Tor, it will help to mask the source of your internet traffic. I'm sure they'll find ways around it eventually, but Tor is what he recommends in the book. You can download them for free on the internet. I think DuckDuckGo is a Tor server. This book was written in 2019, all right? And as more people became aware of how their privacy was being violated, a certain world event occurred which made people all over the world all too happy to volunteer private medical information in the name of community. I wonder what Snowden thinks of that. That's it for this week. Personally, I hated the Martini, couldn't drink it, but the book was excellent. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.